All right, settle in. Got another one cooked up for you. These old cases, they don't just fade away, you know. They stick with you like burrs on a wool coat for decades. My life was the grind of the big city, a place that never sleeps, never stops moving. And in that constant motion, every crime, every mystery had a clear, concrete path back to reality. No ghosts, no curses, just tangled human webs. That's how I operated. Logic was my compass. Facts were my map. You learn to trust your gut in the city, but you trust your evidence more. Because in that concrete jungle, if something looked impossible, it just meant you hadn't found the right piece of the puzzle yet. And usually, that missing piece was some lowlife trying to pull a fast one. My entire career was built on dismantling the supernatural sounding, on showing folks how the trick was done. It has a habit, a way of seeing the world, that stuck with me long after I hung up my badge. But then, sometimes, you get a call that takes you out of your comfort zone, out of the familiar roar of traffic and into the quiet hum of the wild, to places where ancient legends hold more sway than today's headlines. Places where folks don't just believe in spirits, they practically live with them. And when something goes wrong in those places, they don't call the coroner, they call a medium. Or, if they raid desperate enough, a skeptical old detective. That's when my brand of rational thinking really got a workout. Because when everyone is screaming about portals and ancient curses, and all you see are questions, well, it forces you to dig deeper than ever before. To pick apart the whispers from the wind, to separate the shadows from the truly sinister. Because where folks saw phantoms, I always found something far more concrete, and usually far more chilling. This next case took me to a remote, breathtakingly beautiful part of the country, a place dotted with mysterious, ancient rock formations. A place where tourists started vanishing, and the locals blamed the very stones themselves. They called it the work of the vanishing stones. I called it a puzzle that needed solving. The call came from a regional park ranger, a woman named Sarah with a voice tight with worry, almost cracking with desperation. She'd been overseeing this particular stretch of wilderness for years, and nothing in her training had prepared her for what was happening. "We've had another one, detective," she said, her voice barely a whisper, as if afraid the very air was listening. "Another tourist gone right near the Elm Stones, and we ran out of answers." The Elm Stones. I'd read about them, seen the glossy pictures in those tourist pamphlets. A series of ancient, colossal megalithic structures, worn smooth by millennia of wind and rain, scattered across a remote, rugged national park. They stood like silent sentinels, brooding and majestic, whispering of times long past. Local lore, passed down through generations, claimed they were places of immense power, thresholds between worlds. Old stories told of these stones claiming souls, of people walking near them and simply disappearing, never to be seen again. Some said the stones would momentarily open, swallowing the unwary. Others whispered of vengeful ancient spirits, guarding sacred ground, reaching out to pull intruders into the earth itself. For decades, these were just scary bad-time stories for campfires, quaint tales for tourists seeking a thrill. But now, they were becoming a terrifying, undeniable reality. In the last few months, half a dozen hikers, all experienced, all well prepared for wilderness tracks, had vanished without a trace in the immediate vicinity of the Elm Stones. No bodies found, no gear recovered, no signs of struggle, no footprints leading away, just an empty space where a living, breathing person had been moments before. Search parties, extensive ones, complete with specialized search and rescue dogs and advanced drone technology, had scoured every inch of the designated trails and far beyond, coming up empty every single time. It was as if the earth had simply swallowed them whole. What added to the overwhelming dread and fueled the eerie atmosphere were the scattered, consistent reports from other hikers, seeing strange, pulsating lights shimmering amongst the stones at dusk, often described as an unearthly glow, or hearing a faint, ethereal, almost bell-like ringing sound emanating from the very rocks themselves. Moments before one of the disappearances, the park was on the verge of being shut down indefinitely, gripped by a pervasive, irrational fear that no logical explanation could possibly quell. The local economy, dependent on tourism, was crumbling. I drove out there, leaving the persistent hum of city traffic behind for the stark, almost deafening silence of vast wilderness. The air was clean, sharp, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth, a welcome change but also a stark reminder of how vulnerable a human can be out here. I walked among the towering stones. They were impressive, all right, radiating an undeniable sense of ancient power. But it was geological power, the raw force of nature, not supernatural. I listened patiently to Ranger Sarah, to the frantic park staff, to the local guides who were now too terrified to lead tours, their voices hushed, their eyes darting towards the looming stones. They all had theories about portals, about ancient spirits awakened, about the very land being vengeful. I nodded, took it all in, sketching mental notes, and then I went to work. I wasn't looking for spirits, I was looking for discrepancies. My first step was to meticulously study every available topographical map of the area, cross-referencing them with the exact last known locations reported by companions or emergency beacons of the missing hikers. Every single one had vanished just slightly off the marked trails, typically venturing a little further than recommended. They were experienced, yes, but they were also a little too adventurous, pushing the boundaries of the established paths in search of that perfect, untouched view. I noticed a subtle, yet undeniable, pattern in the disappearances. They all occurred in specific, narrow time windows, usually late afternoon or early evening, and often when the weather was starting to turn or visibility was slightly reduced by haze or shifting light. This wasn't random. I also observed that the park's official maps, while perfectly adequate for general hiking, didn't show every single geological feature. The terrain was riddled with numerous small, almost hidden fissures and narrow, deep ravines snaking through the landscape. These were barely visible from the main trails, often ingeniously obscured by thick brush, fallen trees, or clever rock formations that blended seamlessly into the surroundings. Some of these looked like natural traps. I then brought in some specialized equipment, the kind that makes the ghost hunters look like kids with toys. Forget the spirit boxes. I brought in a highly sensitive geomagnetic anomaly detector and an array of sophisticated atmospheric sensors. As I walked slowly and deliberately around the Elm Stones, the geomagnetic detector went wild in certain spots. Not everywhere, mind you, but in very specific, concentrated areas around the larger stones. It showed significant, localized fluctuations in the Earth's magnetic field far beyond normal background levels. This wasn't some mystical energy. This was caused by dense, naturally occurring deposits of highly magnetic minerals deep within the bedrock, essentially creating natural magnetic anomalies. This wasn't supernatural. This was geology and the atmosphere. In those same areas of geomagnetic anomaly, the sensors picked up unusual pockets of highly ionized air, particularly when the humidity was high or pressure systems were shifting. Common conditions in this type of mountainous terrain. This ionization, combined with the specific mineral content in the rocks like quartz, for instance, which can generate small electrical charges under stress, could, under the right conditions, create a faint, shimmering electrical discharge, like miniature Elmo's fire, which would manifest as those strange, pulsating lights people reported. The bell-like ringing sound that was a naturally occurring phenomenon known as lithophony, where certain types of rock, due to their unique composition and resonant qualities, when struck by wind or subtle ground vibrations like footsteps or even distant thunder, resonate at specific frequencies, producing clear, bell-like tones that echo through the valleys. Now the pieces were falling into place with a chilling, yet perfectly logical, precision. No portals, no spirits, just a very unfortunate and terrifyingly effective combination of natural phenomena and human behavior. Here's what happened, plain as day. The hikers, many of them carrying modern navigational aids, would venture off the main trails, lured by the promise of more spectacular, secluded views or a personal challenge to explore the untouched wilderness. As they approached the zones of strong geomagnetic anomalies, their compasses would become erratic, wildly spinning, useless for navigation, and their GPS units would temporarily lose signal or provide inaccurate readings, sometimes by dozens of feet. This would lead to rapid disorientation, especially in the late afternoon when daylight was fading quickly, or if a sudden, localized patch of dense, disorienting fog rolled in, a common occurrence in those hidden ravines due to specific microclimates and cold air pockets settling there. Lost, disoriented, and already on edge, the appearance of the pulsating lights, those natural electrical discharges, and the bell-like ringing from the resonating stones would have only added to their panic and confusion, making them believe they were experiencing something deeply supernatural, a phenomenon confirming the local legends. Instead of backtracking cautiously, their fear, amplified by these strange occurrences, would have likely driven them deeper into the maze of fissures and ravines, desperate to escape what they perceived as a malevolent, mystical force, pushing them off any semblance of a safe path. And those deep, hidden fissures and old, unmapped underground crevasses or even remnants of long-forgotten mining tunnels that riddled the terrain, especially off the established paths, often covered by just a thin layer of vegetation or unstable rock. The disoriented hikers, blinded by panic, reduced visibility, and unreliable navigation, would simply stumble, step, or fall into them. These were natural traps, some hundreds of feet deep, others leading to treacherous cave systems, from which there was no escape without specialized rescue equipment and expert knowledge of the underground labyrinth. The park maps didn't show them because they were either too small to mark, or too dangerous to publicize, or simply forgotten over time. hidden from plain sight. The reason no bodies or gear were found on the surface was simply due to the depth and inaccessibility of these natural traps. The sheer randomness of it all, combined with the powerful psychological effect of suggestion from local legends and the disorienting natural phenomena, created the perfect storm for a series of terrifying, non-supernatural disappearances. It was a stark reminder that sometimes the greatest dangers aren't the things that go bump in the night, but the very ground beneath your feet and the way our minds interpret its subtle, yet deadly, signals. So, there you have it, the case of the vanishing tourists at the Elm Stones. No ancient curses, no spirits dragging folks into another dimension. Just a grim testament to the unpredictable, silent power of nature and the dangerous cocktail of disorientation and unexamined belief. This one truly hammered home how easily we can attribute the inexplicable to the mystical when the real answers are far more mundane, yet no less terrifying. Those hikers, they weren't pulled into a portal by a ghostly hand. They were simply led astray by a faulty compass, a sudden fog bank, and the disorienting effects of natural phenomena that were easily mistaken for something otherworldly. Their fear, amplified by generations of local legends about the stones, drove them deeper into a very real and very physical danger. It has a chilling thought, isn't it, that the very land itself, beautiful and ancient as it is, can be a silent, unforgiving trap. That what seems like a mystical sign, a shimmering light, an echoing chime is just a geological quirk, a trick of light and sound, utterly indifferent to human fate, and that our own minds, seeking patterns and meaning, seeking to fit strange occurrences into familiar stories of good and evil, can interpret these natural phenomena as something deeply sinister, leading us straight into harm as way. This case, for me, was a powerful lesson in humility. It reinforced that while human cunning can indeed conjure up elaborate deceptions and use fear as a weapon, sometimes nature itself provides the perfect, deadliest illusion. It doesn't need a motive or a malevolent plan, just the right combination of elements and a human mind ready to believe the fantastic. And that, in its own way, can be far more unsettling than any ghost story conjured by man. So, the next time you find yourself in a wild, remote place, surrounded by tales of the unknown, take a moment. Appreciate the mystery, sure, the ancient majesty, but keep your head screwed on tight. Look for the geological oddities, the subtle shifts in weather patterns, the unique microclimates, the way sound travels, the way light plays tricks. Because often, the true danger isn't some ancient spirit reaching out from the stones. It is the very real, very physical pitfalls that our fear or our faulty equipment might lead us into. Until next time, stay curious, but stay grounded and always, always double check your map.